Hello, and welcome to today's review of the SBGX265. Now, this watch is a model that is sold by Grand Seiko and is the latest iteration of the SBGX265 or the SBGX line in general. It is a quartz watch with a 9F62 movement that is accurate to plus minus 10 seconds a year. Its size is 37 millimeters. And the price, I believe, was around £2,300 from the boutiques. However, you can buy this watch online for around £1,500, which is a phenomenal price for the watch you get. Now, this watch is an introduction to three things. It is an introduction to luxury watches in general. It's an introduction to quartz watches that are luxury, quartz watches rather. And the third thing is that it's an introduction to Grand Seiko. It has all the high quality finishing you get on the higher end models at a cheaper price so that you can, number one, experience the Zeratsu polish in real life, which is something that really cannot be captured on camera. You get a little bit of the shimmering in the dial, but you really don't get the same kind of view in person. Now, this dial itself is something of its own. It is a dial that changes based on every single lighting condition you put it in. For example, now it looks like a dark blue dial. When you put it in the sunlight, it's a brighter blue in color. When you put it in LED light, it becomes a slightly purple color. And then at certain angles, it will look more blue and black. It's just so versatile and just changes all the time. It's such an enjoyable experience to look at a dial like this. And I won't bore you with the details that come with the movement because you could just search that up online. I just want to talk about the watch itself. The first thing that you will notice is that when you wear this watch, it's extremely comfortable. And that's because of the level of finishing that they put into the bracelet and the back of the case. The bracelet is polished on the sides and it has these bevels that run into the actual links themselves. And this means that when you wear the bracelet, these edges are very comfortable on your wrist. The same applies for the inside of the case. It's high polished, where all edges are softened very slightly so they don't cut into your skin. And the clasp has the same design. A lot of people don't seem to like the SBGX or this Grand Seiko clasp in general. However, I think for a watch that's not supposed to be a dive watch, it is more than sufficient. You have this nice brushed finish on the top of the inner clasp, and you get these polished bevels on the inside of the clasp that sit against your skin when the clasp is closed. And this part right here, I have a lot of watches that are very uncomfortable because of the sharp edges. However, on this watch specifically, the polishing prevents that from happening. And I've owned this watch now for, I believe, around 6 months. And look at it. I mean, I've been wearing it very often and it still looks beautiful and shiny. It's very comfortable. I never have to set the watch. Even when I put it in rotation with my other watches, it's always accurate. And honestly, I set the time 6 months ago and it's about 1 second different from the time I set 6 months ago. So really accurate. You know, the plus six, plus 10, plus minus 10, I mean, is just the outer bounds or the upper bound rather. It's not exactly what the watch will be running. And you have this beautiful medallion in the back of the watch as well. This keeps in line with all of the Grand Seiko watches. And I don't know if this is something specific to my watch or Grand Seiko watches, but the medallion lines up perfectly with the case. I don't know if that's threading and we're just lucky with this watch, but it looks very nice. Now, the hands on this watch are stunning. They are nice and heavy. They have a lot of volume and you can look at it in detail with a loupe. And that's something that I found myself doing even 6 months into owning this watch. I always grab my cleaning cloth my microfiber cloth, I wipe the dial down, I then put a loop on my hand, on my eye, and I just stare at the dial. And it is something to behold, honestly. Just the way it plays with the light, the way it shimmers, it's like looking at a piece of art. And that's really what you get with this watch. And the seconds hand, it really doesn't bother me at all. You know, I only owned mechanical watches before this, and I gotta say that this seconds hand, number one, you forget that it ticks. But number two, when you do notice that it ticks so perfectly that you don't even care that it's a quartz watch. The hand hits the markers perfectly every single time. There's no juttering, no stuttering, nothing. And I know on camera it may look like it's not hitting the markers properly, but that's because of the angles. If you look at the watch straight on in person, it never actually misses the marks. It's just because the camera lens is somewhere over here rather than in the center of the watch. Now, the date, when that swaps over, it's like a rifle bolt. It's instantaneous. You blink and you miss it. However, you do hear a changeover if the environment is quiet. Now, that's not an issue. It just tells you, it's more like an audible cue that the next day has started. And the date change happens anywhere between 12 o'clock and 12:05, depending on the watch you have. It's the same, it happens at the same time in a specific watch. However, that's the date change window that Grand Seiko have given themselves for all of their watches. It hacks, obviously, and in the macro, I will have to say that it is stunning. However, there are definitely imperfections or dirt that cannot be seen by the naked eye, obviously, that is there on the macro shots. I do not have a macro camera at this time. However, I am just mentioning it to you so that if you do put on a 10x loop, for example, you will expect to see some dirt or some marks on the hands. And that's something that, to be honest with you, as a watchmaker, is very difficult to get rid of because of the environment you're in. It's something that just comes with all watches. And honestly, the Grand Seiko factory is probably the cleanest or one of the cleanest you can see. And so I wouldn't have any concern for it. It's not something you can see by eye, and it can only be seen on a loop. So I hope that this review has been helpful. And I'm trying to give you as many angles of the watch that I can, so that if you're considering buying it, which I highly recommend you do, just to try it out before you go for higher end models. And you know, the one thing about this watch, because it's quartz, if you have one quartz watch in your collection, the benefit is that you can put it in your box, and then whenever you need to, number one, pick up a watch that you don't want to, that you've been wearing a watch for a while and you need to go out in a hurry and you want to change your watch, you can just put this on with no issue. So always set to the right time. The other benefit is that if you are picking up a mechanical watch, this is always there as a reference for time. You don't have to go to your PC and check the time. You don't have to go find your phone. It's right there in the watch box with your other watches, and you can set the time knowing that this is accurate with no issue. The battery life on these watches is around 3 years, I believe, and you don't really have to worry about changing the battery itself in terms of danger to the movement, because the movements are hermetically sealed. And so any watchmaker with a pressure testing machine and the batteries can change this watch. You don't actually have to go to Grand Seiko. You can, but it's probably cheaper elsewhere, and you get just the same service. There's nothing special to changing a battery. So I would recommend you do it at a local watchmaker who has a pressure testing machine, so that they can check that the water resistance is 100 meters when they finish changing the battery. Thank you for watching my review. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments.